Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by, and let me wish you security and safety and good health for you and your family and your loved ones, because this certainly remains an unprecedented moment. Bill Gates called it a once-in-a-century pathogen, and certainly feels that way, doesn't it? Let me start with macro thoughts. An astonishing chart. The UK economy could shrink 12.8% in 2020, which would be the worst year since 1709. And I was racking my brain for what that was in that particular year. The IMF says the great lockdown recession will likely be the worst since the Great Depression. And that's why I'd said a few weeks ago that a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy, though they've got a very steep rebound next year, which I don't subscribe to, though I'm very impressed with Ms. Gopinath, I must say. 6th of April, I said, I also know we are about to enter the Great Depression, and certainly nothing has changed my mind about that. The virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved. On another point, I came across this from William Dalrymple. I've never seen the development of our numerals expressed more clearly, from Brahmi via East Arabic to the medieval West. Source, wonderful pathfinders. Indeed. And William again, the Buddha in reassurance, mudra from Takht-il-Bahi, now in the Peshawar Museum. And it certainly made me consider the way we are now. The amazing thing tonight was after the rainbow over One World Trade Center in New York City disappeared, Lower Manhattan turned into the pot of gold, Gary Hirshhorn. And this is another glorious sunrise in the Masai Mara, and that's via Kenya Pics. Mother Africa, I've just started watching this, History of Africa with Zainab Badawi, who really is extremely accomplished, and I'm enjoying watching this series. I came across an article in a French newspaper, Le Propre, du temps de guerre et aussi qui ce temps devient infini. On ne sait pas quand cela va se terminer. Stéphane Audouin Rousseau. And it's really extraordinary. The most striking phrase of Emmanuel Macron during his second speech in Mulhouse was the one that was the least noted. They have rights over us. He was speaking of the caregivers. It is the verbatim of a sentence by Clemenceau speaking of French fighters at the end of the war. The reference to the Great War is self-explanatory, all the more so when we know that the former director of the Centenary Mission, Joseph Zimet, joined the Elysee Communications team. Likewise, for the We Will Stand is a word of the Great War. Civilians had to hold the front. The front had to hold. It had to hold a quarter of an hour longer than the adversary. This referent is fascinating to me as a historian. I cannot endorse this rhetoric, because for there to be war, there must be combat and violent death, unless the notion is fully diluted. But what strikes me as a war historian is that we are indeed in a time of war. Usually we pay little attention to time when it is an extremely important variable in our social experiences. The weekend before confinement, with the growing perception of the gravity of the situation, the weather thickened and we only focused on one subject, which swept away all the others. Likewise, between July 31st and August 1st, 1914, the weather changed. What was inconceivable the day before became possible the next day. The characteristic of wartime is also that this time becomes infinite. We don't know when it will end. We just hope. It is true today as during the Great War or the occupation that it will be over soon. For Christmas 1914, after the spring offensive of 1917, etc., it is by adding short terms that we actually enter the long term of war. If we had been told at the start of confinement that it would be for 2 months or more, it would not have been accepted in the same way. But we were told, as in the war, that it was only a bad time to pass. For the Great War, it seems clear to me that if it had been announced to social actors from the start that it would last 4.5 years and that there would be 1.4 million deaths, they would not have acted the same way. After the contraction of the initial time, we entered this indefinite time, which made us pass into an other temporality without knowing when it will end. I am fascinated by the imagination of the exit as it manifests itself today in the case of deconfinement, on the same mode of deployment already during the Great War. Faced with an immense crisis, his contemporaries do not seem to imagine anything other than a closure of the temporal parenthesis. This time we imagine a return to norms and times before, so I know that the predictive value of the social sciences is equivalent to 0. But history teaches us that after the great crises, there is never a closure of the parenthesis. There will be a day after sure, but it will not look like the day before. I can and I want to be wrong, but I think we will never see the world we left a month ago. Why imagine such a break when precisely we're not in a moment of brutality and violence comparable to what the Great War was? The seeds of a serious political crisis were already present before COVID-19, but I fear that tomorrow the political crisis will be terrible, with potentially deadly political accountability. Paul Valéry's famous phrase, "We civilizations, we now know that we are mortal," says something very deep about the collapse of belief in a better world, a collapse without which we cannot understand the development of totalitarianisms during the interwar period. The Second World War constituted a second anthropological shock, not so much by the awareness of the extermination of the Jews of Europe much later, but with the explosion of the atomic bomb, which opened the possibility of the self-destruction of human societies. In my eyes, our societies today are undergoing a first-rate anthropological shock. They did everything to banish death from their waiting horizons. They increasingly relied on the power of digital technology and the promise of artificial intelligence. But we are reminded of our fundamental animality, the biological foundation of our humanity, as the anthropologist François Héritier called it. We remain Homo sapiens, belonging to the animal world, attackable by diseases against which the means of fight remain rustic. With regard to our supposed technological power, staying at home without medicine, without vaccine, is it very different from what was happening in Marseille during the plague of 1720? Very powerful article, I must say. Zoom, weed and toilet paper, that's the world now, dude, anonymous friend, Lincoln's Bible. Sunrise above the clouds on top of Mount Kenya, photo by Peter Elia. The Seal of Solomon was replicated by Muslim majors many times, but there are various stories of the original. One says Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, received the ring and so had dominion over jinn. This would explain his relation with the jinn ruler Zafar, otherwise known as Jafar. My favorite legend says that Solomon gave the ring to one of his bird-like jinn to carry to the Queen of Sheba, but the poor creature got lost and accidentally dropped it into the sea, where it became the Comoros Islands. I didn't know that. Then I came across this from V. Chakarova. Everything is transient and nothing endures. There is birth and death, growth and decay. There is combination and separation. Wherever you look, there is a rushing and a struggling and an eager pursuit of pleasure. The world is Vanity Fair, full of changes and transformations. And that took me to Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. There is a super article I came across, a strange braggart's incompetent naval career in the heart of Africa. The self-proclaimed hero of a little-known episode of World War I was equal parts H. Rider Haggard, Fitzcarraldo, and Monty Python. A superannuated Royal Navy commander who fought an absurd naval campaign on a lake in the middle of Africa. You've got to read it. Lieutenant Commander Geoffrey Spicer Simpson. And this was written about by the author Giles Foden. In 1914, Belgium controlled the mountains and vast forests of the Congo and ruled them with a heart of darkness. Britain claimed a gigantic swathe of territory stretching from South Africa to Egypt and aimed to create a Cape to Cairo railway. Seeking its own place in the sun, Germany governed a huge chunk of East Africa, augmented the unique riches of the region with a cotton empire that rivaled the American South. It's an extraordinary tale, and it's about the battle for Lake Tanganyika in the First World War. All started in 1915 when the Germans launched the Graf Götzen into Lake Tanganyika. She was shipped down in 5,000 boxes from Germany to Dar es Salaam and assembled in Tanzania, which was then a German colony. Then this fortress was the only battleship on the lake, could shell the Allies with impunity from kilometers away, and assured German dominance across the entire western border of modern Tanzania. So the plan was to ship down 2 small gunboats from London, hike them across Africa, assemble them, put them on the lake. Picked by the British to run this show was this guy, Geoffrey Basil Spicer Simpson. You've got to read about him. He's hilarious. And can you believe it? This Graf Gertzen was dredged and recommissioned as a ferry and has become the MV Liemba and has been running for nearly a century. You can still take her from Kigoma to Mupulungu. This video, rats take over the emptied Bangkok streets as humans retreat indoors at night to fight a virus. Bangkok streets are handed over to increasingly brazen rats who are venturing out across the Thai capital in huge numbers. Scientists have reported the first case of the coronavirus spreading from a dead body. Well, having read the article by Malcolm Gladwell about the Spanish flu and the bodies that were frozen in the tundra, you would have thought people would have realized this, because there is something karmic in this COVID-19. There is also some fear that masks increase earthquakes. No evidence against. This is Nassim Taleb, a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The zeitgeist of a time is its defining spirit or its mood, and the zeitgeist of 2020 is simply indescribable. President Trump is halting funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess WHO's role in mismanaging the coronavirus outbreak. February 22nd, I said WHO is captured and millions of lives have been trifled with. And I said then that the game is up. Wilhelm Middelkoop, White House today, and really represents the zeitgeist, doesn't it? Today we'll reach 2 million confirmed cases globally. It has taken only 12 days to go from 1 to 2 million confirmed cases. Remy GMI, the viral moment has arrived. 13 countries now report more than 1,000 deaths related to COVID-19. Look at this, ONS mortality statistics in a single chart. The worst week for UK mortality, all causes since records began. Ed Conway, Sky. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Dr. Eric Ding, if the vaccine truly isn't arriving for 12 months, and it isn't, we will be in this pandemic, mitigation, containment, reopening, resurgence, purgatory for a long time. And he's right, viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. Beijing has virtually walled itself off to outsiders with dramatic measures to protect China's seat of power against the threat of a second wave of coronavirus infections. 16th of February, I was quoting that article in Reddit where he said the leadership is safely ensconced in a secret bunker underneath Zongnanhai, the headquarters of the party in Beijing. It's too bad more White House reporters don't have the balls of this cryon writer, tweeted Bill Birtles. You didn't use it to prepare hospitals. You didn't use it to ramp up testing. This is Paula Reed, CBS, who was very aggressive, but rightly so, because a reality TV star did botch the response to a global pandemic, and now we're all imprisoned in our homes and forced to watch him daily. To watch the daily briefing is to understand that the control machine has a novice, a hubristic Narcissus in charge of the console. Asher Rangappa, I am God and King and Law. Last came anarchy. He rode on a white horse, splashed with blood. He was pale, even to the lips, like death in the apocalypse, and he wore a kingly crown. And in his grasp a scepter shone. On his brow this mark I saw, I am God and King and Law. This is how it looks when you're not afraid. This is Dr. Anthony Fauci. a sophisticated bureaucratic operator. He knows how to tell them exactly what's the truth as tactfully as he can. In his repeated press briefing corrections of Trump's fantasies and misstatements, Fauci has made it sound as if he is saying yes rather than no. That's nuts. Anil Vora, who's the top dog now? And that took me back to the 27th of January when I was quoting Tracy Alloway, who said, so who had mutated bat snake flu as their top market risk for 2020? According to figures released Monday, 16,888 people who fall into the category of key workers and their households had been tested. So far, 34% were confirmed to have the virus. This is the charge of the Light Brigade territory. Patrick Lawrence, our post-pandemic future. Will human civilization simply resume course, or will we recognize the need for numerous far-reaching reforms? Another way to pose the question, is humanity any longer capable of self-correction? No one anywhere can credibly turn in an answer to this question, not yet. And then he's talking about, with our plastic skyscraping project imploding, perhaps we can devolve into a breed that's simpler, muddier, and gnarlier, less distracted, so much saner and more honest to those around us. Since we can't escape them, perhaps we'll become men again. Or maybe not, cowed by fear, oozing despair and dependent on those who've clearly betrayed us at each turn. We'll become even more catatonic in our cells. After lockdown, we'll stumble like blind fools into this farce again. Then he describes a friend sending along a line from Don DeLillo's White Noise. Here, we won't die, we shop, but the difference is less marked than you think. And I touched on this in the article I wrote, The Way We Live Now, when I was quoting DeLillo. Everything is barely weeks, everything is days. We have minutes to live. Welcome to the wild world of epidemic diplomacy. Customs rules waylay ventilators and masks. Relief planes fly home half empty. Chinese diplomats force countries to give public thanks to China for selling PPE. Outstanding article in the New York Times, Paul Mazur. What is most striking to me is the extent to which the Chinese government appears to be demanding public displays of gratitude from other countries. This is certainly not in the tradition of the best humanitarian relief efforts. Emails and proposed drafts of the resolution included lines saying that China has adopted unprecedented and rigorous measures. Actions have been effective in curbing the virus from spreading to other parts of China and the world. Mr. Roth sent back a one-word reply, nuts. And that's the point that Professor Zanrun was making. What is thriving, however, is all that ridiculous red culture and nauseating adulation that the system heaps on itself via shameless pro-party hacks who chirrup hosannas at every turn. IMF World Economic Outlook has just been posted. Global growth is projected at -3% in 2020, an outcome far worse than during the 2009 global financial crisis. Growth in the advanced economy group projected at -6.1% in 2020. Emerging market developing economies projected to contract by -1% in 2020. China -2.2%, ex-China -2.2%. Even with a sharp rebound in the remainder of the year, sizable fiscal support, the economy is projected to grow at a subdued 1.2% in 2020. Sub-Saharan Africa -1.6%, Nigeria -3.4%, South Africa -5.8%. That's why I said a V-shaped recovery is a fantasy. I also know we're about to enter the Great Depression. Geeta Gopinath, the courageous actions of doctors and nurses needs to be matched by policymakers all over the world so we can jointly overcome this COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And that's why I said the virus is not correlated to endogenous market dynamics, but is an exogenous uncertainty that remains unresolved. Top creditors to suspend poorest countries' debt payments. Some 76 countries, of which 40 are in sub-Saharan Africa, eligible to have debt payments worth a combined $20 billion suspended out of a total of $32 billion the countries were to spend on debt servicing this year. We have obtained a debt moratorium at the level of bilateral creditors and private creditors for a total of $20 billion, Bruno Le Maire. We're glad in particular that China agreed to participate in this moratorium. All that will free up money for the countries that need it the most. Private creditors, let's see if this is true, have agreed on a voluntary basis to roll over or refinance $8 billion in debt, a French finance ministry source has said. As I said about Africa, balance sheets are maxed out. And this is a great help. Dollar index last around the 99 level. Euro dollar 109.54. Heathrow traffic down 52.4% in March, estimated down 90% in April. That's why I said we're moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. Gold a little bit soft this morning, 1710, but unlike other commodities, is a currency, and the major thrust in the demand and escape from what is perceived to be a fiat money system, paper money, seems to me to be deteriorating. That's Alan Greenspan via Mr. Middlecope. Today, the streets of Venezuela are covered with cash. This is what happens when hyperinflation destroys the value of money. It becomes worthless, and that's the situation we're going into, which Scott Burke called the print shop. And I remain of the view that gold is going up to $2,000 and it will turn viral and parabolic, and that we're in a current short-term correction. Crude oil broke below $20 a barrel. As I said, the price of crude oil is perfectly correlated to the COVID-19 sudden stop, moving from a world of hyper-connectedness to a world of quarantine. A return to a hyper-connected 100 million barrels per day world is not going to happen for the foreseeable future. Javier Blas, oil market meltdown, WTI down 10%, below $20 a barrel, Brent crude 7% below $30 a barrel. And I take you back to that Trafigura co-head of trading who says consumption may be down 35 million barrels per day. And therefore we have no hope of production cuts matching the demand destruction. Emerging markets, while so far the virus has been sweeping through developed economies, it looks like it is now affecting the emerging markets. This is REMI. 140,000 confirmed cases between 12 countries, but I think this is massively understated. In India, a precipitous recession is inevitable according to Bloomberg Economics. GDP is set to drop 25% in the current quarter. Brazil has likely 12 times more coronavirus cases than the official count. Researchers at a consortium of Brazilian universities and institutes examined the ratio of cases resulting in death through April 10 and compared it with data on the expected death rate from the WHO. Much higher than expected death rate in Brazil indicates there are many more cases of the virus than are being counted, with the study estimating only 8% of cases are being officially reported. President Bolsonaro said famously, Brazilians aren't infected by anything, even when they fall into a sewer. He also said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We are looking into the rearview mirror when it comes to emerging markets. I like this, a room at Hotel Fasano Belo Horizonte. and I rather like that type of look. IMF World Economic Outlook, Ethiopia 3.2% too high, Kenya 1% too high, Tanzania 2% too high, Uganda 3.5% too high, DR Congo minus 2.2%, Mali 1.5%, Madagascar 0.4%. COVID-19, this was as of yesterday, 15,249 cases, 816 deaths, and 2,895 recoveries. But as I said, we're looking in the rearview mirror. And that in nearly every country in the world, when the virus reaches 100 people, it increases by 35% daily. Latest figures for coronavirus in South Africa: St. Albans prison has 78 confirmed cases, 53 inmates and 25 prison officials have been infected. MPC in South Africa cut the repo rate by a whopping 100 basis points, taking it to 4.25%. The central bank governor says recovery after the coronavirus peak is uncertain, and he sees GDP contracting 6.1% in 2020. I've written about the China EM frontier feedback loop phenomenon, and I said the ZAR is the purest proxy for that phenomenon, and that this trend was positive for 20 years and has undergone a trend reversal. South African All Shares down 12.63%. This is dollar rand. As I said, tourism is stopped out in 2020. Egyptian tourism revenues expected to drop by $5 billion, says the planning minister. Egyptian pound 15.75, EGX30 down 25.09% year to date. Nigeria All Share minus 18.49% year to date. IMF has approved $1 billion disbursement to Ghana. Ghana Stock Exchange minus 5.45% year to date. Glencore feud deepens as Zambia moves to revoke copper mines. They've been given 7 days to show why their license should not be cancelled or revoked. Copper prices have tumbled big time. I've written about Zambia. They didn't get a penny from the IMF, and I call them the canary in the coal mine, and that they're still popping quaaludes in Lusaka. It's been a tumultuous, loss-making year since the $1 billion IPO of Jumia. This is considered Africa's Amazon. First major Africa-focused tech company to list on the New York Stock Exchange. Soared on its opening day, up 75%, valuing the company at $3 billion. Today, the valuation is $250 million. I said the initial Cinderella run was the result of a confluence of market conditions, a scarcity of this kind of opportunity, an African tech company listing in New York, and a lack of interrogation because there were so many reputable anchor investors already in the business. There was MasterCard, MTN, AXA, Millicom. Jumia benefited from a positive spillover effect with other high-profile tech IPOs slated for that last year: Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Slack. That point in time was about peak optimism, I said, about these tech opportunities. Subsequently, Citron Research hit them with allegations of fraud and material discrepancies, several class action lawsuits. They're talking about attaining profitability by 2022. They won't do that. Partnered with Vivo Energy and 2,000 fuel station outlets, allowing customers to pick up orders as well as make payments. They do have a first mover advantage with these sorts of valuations. It might be attractive for a bigger player to scoop them up as a quick market entry point. The valuation around which, however, Rocket got out was not a stellar one, and therefore counterintuitively the message they're sending is that we're prepared to take what we get now rather than hang on for the business to right size itself. It was a very negative signal for their earliest investors that they are prepared to cash out and run. IFC is set to take a minority stake in Naivas, the supermarket chain here, for $15 million. part of a consortium of investors, which includes Amethyst Finance. Have a look at this, that your chief fire marshal here in Nairobi, our erstwhile governor, saying, and he's giving out food with Hennessy. So I was saying that LVMH is now going mass market. Kenya shilling 105.90, Nairobi All Share down 19.72% year to date, and NSE20 down 25.77% year to date. Thank you for listening.